Coming soon to a game store near you. It's fierce. It's evil. It's Delver Part 2. Because sequels usually are not as good as the first. So we in the Magic community have a saying. It's called "Seventh time is the charm." By this I mean we have our 7th copy. Yes, that's right, 7th of Jace. I mean, come on. Tamiyo is like mentioned in the set. Couldn't we have Tamiyo instead, or a new Tamiyo, or reprint Tamiyo? Anyway, this Jace is actually kind of nice. I don't think it's overpowered or like Jace the Mind Sculptor, or it's pretty well balanced. However, I don't think it's going to see any standard play for a really long time, mainly because of adolescent Jace, who is just kind of out of control in standard right now. However, once adolescent Jace does leave, I feel like it will probably see a bit of play, as it is a very powerful card. If anything, I'd have to guess that this card will actually probably go down a little bit, and when Jace leaves, it may actually go back up a little bit. So it might be nice to get a copy or two while it goes down. Like I say, these abilities are really good. Scrying and drawing is always nice. Bouncing a creature is nice as well. You can even bounce your creatures and then reuse their enter the battlefield effects again. And the ultimate is kind of, at first glance, this actually looked kind of weak, but usually a hindrance like this is usually enough to win you the game. Bottom line is, if you can get your hands on some, do so, especially if you play standard. Even if you play casually, I think this is a fun casual card as well. Next, I want to talk about what's probably my favorite card in the set. It's a Startled Awake. Seriously, this is some really creative stuff right here. I always kind of figured they would do something like this, having a sorcery that transforms into something else. I just never really figured out how they would do it, but this is an excellent example, and cards like this just... I can't stop smiling. This card's just great. However, the big question is, how playable is it? And frankly, I think it is pretty playable. I think it can see some standard play. We do have a lot of mill cards in standard, and this might be a good addition to those cards. In modern, I don't think this will be that playable. I can maybe see it as a 1 or a 2 of in the Turbo Mill deck. But other than that, I think outside of that, I don't really know. You have to have like a very mill-heavy shell, but nonetheless, I think this card is powerful. Personally, I'm going to get some copies just because how awesome this is, and the big mill enthusiast that I am about alternately winning aside from damage. But if you don't really need this or think you can pass on it, then it's probably safe to pass on it. I love it, however. The final mythic that Blue got is Juralf's Masterpiece, and honestly, calling this thing a masterpiece, I feel, is just a little bit over-glorifying it. Well, a 7/7 for 5 is pretty sweet. There's just, well, a lot of kind of drawbacks in a sense. For a color that's big on drawing cards and keeping cards in your hand, I feel like this punishment just kind of hurts Blue a lot. I'm not saying it can't work, I just feel like it belongs in another color. Frankly, I feel like if you play this casually, I feel like this is going to be a real headache for some casual players. If you're playing something else, however, I feel like you do need a lot to make this work. I'm not saying it won't work, it's just, it takes a while to get it back, and you need to have like clues or more card draw, which is doable for Blue, but it just, that drawback, it's really kind of a kick in the teeth. Next up, I want to talk about Engulf the Shore, and this is a cool card because it's kind of a 4-mana board wipe in the form of kind of the evacuation style, as it bounces all creatures to their owner's hands rather than destroying them flat out. The only real problem with it is it really only fit into Blue decks, and while you probably can splice it with other colors or the like Shocklands from Ravnica or the Battle Lands from Battle for Zendikar, it's really, the point is you have to play Blue to make it really work at its best. However, it is like Evacuation in the fact that it is an instant, and instant speed board wipes are actually really sweet, if that is one thing Cyclonic Rift and Consume the Ink have taught us. Also, is that an Eldrazi in that wave? I wonder who it could be. If you're sick and tired of drawing bad hands, Forgotten Creation might be a card for you. If you don't like your hand mid to late game, you can just pitch it and draw a hand of that many cards. Honestly, I'm a big fan of cards like this, and if you have a deck, or whether it be for constructed or casual, that has triggered abilities upon drawing more cards, then this is definitely a card for you to consider. It's probably not a 4 of, but if you like decks like that, this card is for you. One card that I definitely would consider being a 4 of, or at least getting 4 copies, is Factor Fiction. Sadly, Factor Fiction isn't in Standard at the moment, but we do have a pretty sweet replacement for it in Epiphany at the Drownyard. Honestly, I feel like it might be better late game, but even if it's not quite the same power level as Factor Fiction for the same price of mana, as you do get 4 cards rather than 5 by paying 4 mana into it, or by putting 3 mana into X. 4 cards, or having your opponent choose between putting 2 cards in your hand and 2 cards into your graveyard at instant speed, is still pretty sweet. Like Factor Fiction, this is probably going to cause some havoc in Standard. It very well could see some play in Modern too. I do think it is that good. Especially with graveyard synergistic decks. Late game, it's just going to be nuts, because they're going to be playing Factor Fiction for like 8 cards, and that's gonna be fun. Bottom line, get some of these. They're gonna be sweet. Next, we want to welcome you to the Fold. Whatever that is. Welcome to the Fold is actually part of an incomplete cycle of cards that you can discard and pay for its madness cost by actually paying more mana than it actually costs to get added benefits. In this form of the card, it gains control of a creature. However, I think I would have liked this card a little more if it were similar to a, Threads of Disloyalty, but still I think this could see some play in Standard. I feel like we've had cards like Domestication, which were played in Standard before, and I feel like this could see some play as well. Especially if you can cast that for Madness late game. That's going to be pretty nasty. Bottom line, I don't think it's a 4 of, but I think it will be nice to have a few copies of it. If you like heavy counterspells for casual games, Confirmed Suspicions is a really sweet card. While there are, of course, more efficient counterspells in Standard right now, Confirmed Suspicions is pretty sweet for like casual games like EDH, as drawing 3 cards later is always nice for a long, grindy game. Next, I want to talk about That Thing in the Ice. It's supposed to turn into this giant monster when you cast a bunch of instants and sorceries, and when it transforms into, well, another Evacuation. Except it doesn't bounce horror creatures. Seriously, this card seems like it's pretty hyped, and I don't blame it. It's a pretty cool card. It acts as a blocker early on, and a board wipe later in the game that turns into a 7/8. That's pretty sweet. The thing is, I feel like your opponent can do something about it before it flips, but then again, not every deck will probably have an answer for this. Bottom line, last I checked, this was really expensive, but I don't think it's going to be as expensive as it is, although it is a flip card and it is a rare, so it probably will maintain some of its value a little bit. Also, where's that Vampire Hex Mage reprint we've been looking for this? I feel like that would be sweet out right now, and good synergy and allowing you to flip it whenever you want. Moving on to the uncommon cards, we have the Trail of Evidence, and since there are a lot of decks that are either in constructed or casual that really build around instants and sorceries, I feel like if you really like clues and instants and sorceries, this is definitely a card for you. I mean, Storm, anybody? Speaking of decks like that, you're going to love Rise from the Tides as well, because you spend the first 5 turns of your game casting instants and sorcery spells and getting them in your graveyard. You cast this, you're going to get a lot of zombies. Honestly, I feel like this is more of a casual card, but I don't know. It could probably see some constructed play if you really, really want to work on that. One thing that I will be trying in Constructed is Invasive Surgery, and honestly I feel like this could probably extend back to probably Legacy with against Show and Tell decks. You'd have to mill yourself pretty quickly, but still that can make a Show and Tell player pretty angry. Honestly, this is a wonderful card at stopping combo decks that revolve around a sorcery spell like Scape Shift and similar things in Modern. I'm sure there's several others, and if a deck like that ever pops its head, this will be here to hose it, and that's awesome.
Honestly, this is the closest thing to a mana-efficient Quash that we've had for a while, and we haven't really had too many cards like Quash. But I'm excited for this. This is actually pretty sweet. Get some copies of this. It will more than likely see some play. On the side note, I still love Pour Over the Pages. Get some. If you're a casual player that plays EDH, you will love this card. Because, I mean, who doesn't like untapping their Karu land? One reprint that Blue actually did get is the reprinting of Reckless Scholar, which is a very good Madness enabler, but sadly Adolescent Jace is going to be played in Standard for a while, and until it leaves, Reckless Scholar won't be enabling any Madness in Constructed. That's kind of a shame. Speaking of Madness, Blue got some pretty sweet Madness cards in the form of Just the Wind. Yeah, I would just want to cast the Wind. I mean, in a game where you can cast fireballs and lightning bolts, I would just want to cast the Wind. That must be some really powerful wind, as it's returning a whole creature to its owner's hand. Broken Concentration is this set's Madness counterspell, which actually costs more if you cast it for this Madness cost. I feel like this is actually a fairly playable spell in Standard, but I kind of miss Circular Logic. Since I like milling, I like the Manic Scribe. I might want to try him in Turbo Mill in Modern, but I feel like the Delirium might be a little bit hard to get there, so I sadly don't think he's going to be my additional Hedron Crabs. But hey, I mean, I'd still be willing to give him a try. I'm sure he's at least good at writing books. Seriously though, the art on this card is just ridiculous. I mean, who interrogates a zombie?